Today we're going to talk about how to pair your flagships in Infinite Galaxy, so stick around in this video for some of my favorite strategies and pairings for your flagships. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and in this video, sponsored by the makers of Infinite Galaxy, we've got to talk about flagship pairs, because there's a bunch of different ways that you can think about pairings, and some are more optimal than others. Now, let me just run through a few things you could be considering for pairing, such as pairing by warship type that is improved, or pairing with the legendary and epic tier equivalents, or pairing by damage type on flagships, or even pairing by awakening skills. So let's start from the top, and we'll go over a few of these ideas with very simply pairing by the warship type that benefits. Now, this is really obvious legendary epic pairs that are actually really good all the way around. I really like the Artemis paired with the Orion, that's the epic and legendary tier for frigates. I like the Cyclops with the Brontes, that is the legendary and epic tier for cruisers. And I also really like the Hades and Radamanthus, that is the legendary and epic for destroyers. Now, between all these pairs, there's one sort of weird dynamic, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more later in the video, which is that for some reason, the maximum tier of the destroyer is a missile type weapon, and both the Hades and the Radamanthus are boosting laser damage. So the tier 9 will be the warship that gets the most benefit. Similarly, it's a little bit weird that we've got the Cyclops and also the Brontes boosting kinetic damage when the top damage type at tier 10 for cruisers is actually going to be lasers. At tier 9, it's the kinetic damage. So I don't know if maybe we should be using the lower tier of warship with these. For now, I've only got tier 9. It's not such a big deal. But I mentioned this because the typing on the Artemis and the Orion is actually perfect at tier 10 when you eventually get there, which, look, we all will eventually over time, and the more farms you have, the faster that will go for resources. If you've got the kinetic damage type at tier 10, I think the Artemis Orion is probably the stronger of these pairs, but I do really want to call out the fact that there is just a very nice balance of boosting just about everything that destroyers do on the Hades. The attack, the number of troops that you can bring, the speed. That is one way to think about pairing by warship type. And you can go a little bit further with this. This was all legendary and epic pairs. Maybe at some point in the future here, we'll have more flagships that boost each of these different types of warships. But you also can do this legendary and epic pairing for the other types of flagships that are out there as well. For example, you could get a look at the Odysseus paired with the Apollo. I really like this sort of an idea with the legendary tier and the epic tier, and you just go all in on whatever they do really well jointly together. So can you imagine if you're pairing up the Apollo with the Odysseus? I mean, like, the number of losses you're going to have from battle is going to be extremely low. That might just be broken good, honestly. Taking a look at the Theseus and pairing with the Poseidon, like, it could be really strong as well. These are flagships that we haven't already talked about. They actually don't technically care about the type of warship you bring, and they are very, very strong when battling against other players. Of course, if you're doing PvE, one really sick combo is going to be the Nemesis paired with the Prometheus. This is the legendary and epic flagship pairing, just going all in on whatever that one thing is and what it's doing, whatever that mechanic is. I guess, one other example that is worth talking about, right, is the Athena. There's another gimmick here, which is flagship attack. So you go all in on flagship attack. You could use the Athena. You could pair with the Nemesis. They both do that same thing. That's another way to think about flagship pairs that I think is pretty good. Now, the next way you could pair up flagships, and I think there's some combinations here that are really very strong, is to look at the type of damage that they're dealing. So, for example, if you've got missile typing over here, the Titan could be awesome. And this typing, this damage boost right over here is what we're talking about, the fleet effect. That is very important. That comes from the primary weapon, not the outfitting slots, but the primary weapon skill of the flagship. influencing hugely the amount of damage that your fleet is going to do. I mean, look at this. The level 6, I mean, 30% kinetic weapon attack? Hello, baby. You want that typing to match your warship for sure. And I mean, when I rank this up again, man, 35% kinetic weapon attack. It's just totally crazy. So one thing you could be looking at is just the typing. So as an example, although the Hades has a mismatch typing with tier 10 of the destroyers, I still think it's just such a good combination because it's just so good with destroyers that you could use the Hades and pair with the Titan with tier 10 destroyers. I think that would be really, really strong. Or you could look at flagships, for example, like this one right over here, the Hephaestus, boosting laser damage. It doesn't care about the type of warship that you're bringing. And so you could use this in a couple combinations. You could use tier 9 for your destroyers, which has laser typing. Use the Hephaestus, which has laser, and also the Hades, which has laser, right? I think that's actually a really solid pair that I'm planning to use if I need to use destroyers in the not too distant future. And also, I can switch things around when I'm getting to tier 10 with my cruisers, and I can use the Cyclops, which, look, I think these flagships that specialize in a unit type they're just so good for that unit type. You use them anyways, even with the mismatch typing. And I could use, again, the Hephaestus to get that laser damage boost, which is pretty solid. The thing that I want to call your attention to, at least at this moment in time in the game, is that there's actually not that many kinetic flagships, really. Not many at all at the legendary tier. You've got your cruiser-based flagship, so you'd never pair that with the Artemis, right? And if I just cruise through these, the Hades is laser typing, the Titan is missile typing, the Odysseus is laser, the Athena is laser. So that, as an example, shows you that the options are actually kind of limited for now with weapon typing to get a really great matchup, but I still think it's worth thinking about. And the most flexible option is actually laser, which means for destroyers at tier 9 and cruisers at tier 8 or 10, you could do some pretty cool stuff with lasers with, again, using the Hephaestus, using the Hades, using the Odysseus, using even the Athena. I think you could do some pretty solid work pairing by damage type. Now, the final pairing consideration that I want to give you is looking at the awakening skills and trying to find the ones that are the most synergistic. I talked in a video recently about awakening skills, and I actually think this combination could be really, really nutty. You would pick flagships that are reducing the armor of the enemy. So the Athena reduces armor, which is kind of gangbuster, and also the Titan is reducing armor. Now, the thing that I don't love about this is the fact that there's missile typing over here and laser typing over there. So unless you're bringing a mixed fleet, which maybe you are, but probably not, having the armor reduction effects, they stack, but like, I don't know exactly how good it is to have reduced the armor of the enemy by over like 250%. But it just seems like it could be very powerful to me. Maybe the way to approach that is to have two separate fleets and lots of people bring that effect to a big brawl. I think it could be really gangbuster. I think that looking at what's going on in the awakening skills, although we don't have a ton of options right now, I think that over time, as potentially more flagships get added, this is something that will be worth thinking about. And the reality is that I don't think we're going to be getting a lot of legendary flagships very quickly. Each flagship takes a very long time to work on, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but I'm still working on my Artemis. I suppose, how am I doing here? I probably have enough Federation Advanced credits that I could go max it now, but then I couldn't get the free value from the shop and all that other good stuff from the campaign. So I'm holding off on actually taking this thing to max. In fact, maybe I can't even max it. I'm only rank 11. I should get to rank 12 and then do this little holding exercise I'm doing now. But I mention this in part because since legendary flagships don't come all that frequently, are there any epic flagship pairs that I think are worthwhile? And you could use all these same principles I've been sharing to pair up epic. So if you were into frigates and you wanted to be using the Orion as an example, The pair you'd be looking for ideally also has kinetic damage. Now, I don't think there is actually a great epic for that, unfortunately. In fact, yeah, I think your like best option for battling other players might actually be the Theseus. You wouldn't, of course, you wouldn't use the Brontes. So yeah, you might actually be a little held up there. You've got a lot more options for both destroyers and cruisers. If you wanted a really solid pair with the Radamanthus, I think for battling other players, the Apollo could be very solid. That would probably be my pick for destroyers at tier 9. And if you're doing the Brontes, right, so tier 9 for using your cruisers, you'd be looking for another kinetic type. Gosh bless. But those are just really hard to find. Wow. I suppose one consideration if you're doing the Orion would be to use, I mean, if you're using tier 9 as an example, again, you just go in on the missile typing. So that also gives you the Atlas as an option. But I guess you'd have to get to T10. And at that point, I mean, this is going to take a while, but you could be using the Brontes, which is an epic, and then also, I guess, a laser-based ship. Again, I think the Apollo would be the best pick there. That would be your best bet if you're going to use cruisers with the Brontes. So those are some of my best pairing ideas. Pairing by flagships that boost the same warship type. Pairing by legend epic pairings that go all in on the same idea. Pairing by damage type, which will happen naturally, by the way, with the legend epic pairing concept. And pairing by awakening skill. But I'm really eager to test more of this stuff, to get to T10 and to battle against other players that also are at T10. And we can see, like, hey, what does the meta look like when everybody's got kind of the same stuff? And then we'll have some much more concrete answers for which ones are the very best. If you enjoyed this video, throw a like on here and consider subscribing. Eventually, we'll get to that end state where we can test all the best flagships and crew and all that good stuff, which I'm very much looking forward to doing. But until then, we're on the grind. Until next time, you have fun smashing your nebula.